We hope. It's Tony Hawk, and he'll be joined on stage by the author, of course, of The Sports Gene. It's David Epstein. Tony, good luck.
Hello, everybody.
So, after watching that, Tony, actually, that brings something to my mind. I know you wrote in the past that you skate every day, and I'm curious if you still do that.
Almost every day, yeah. Life and responsibilities get in the way. It's weird now to be an adult with kids. I have to schedule it ahead of time more, and it used to be just whenever I felt like it. I try to stay active. I was skating here yesterday, actually.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I heard you wiped out a little yesterday in Dublin. How'd that go?
Well, you do. I mean, as you can see from that video, like what we do takes a lot of practice and takes a lot of falling and a lot of perseverance, and that's the only way you learn, though.
But you bring your board everywhere. I mean, you obviously brought it here. You dropped into a skate park. I think you famously brought your board to the White House.
Yeah.
Once. It was an experience that kind of went over differently to different people. I was wondering if you could describe that a little bit.
Well, I was at the White House for an event. It was a Father's Day event, and I bring my skateboard usually to places like that because inevitably people just ask me where it is, or they want to see it or whatever. And so I brought it, and I found myself in a hallway alone, and I handed this guy a camera and skated down the hallway thinking it was pretty cool because I was celebrating why I was there. And I put it out on social media, and it was very polarizing. People thought it was disrespectful, destructive. Other people thought it was super cool, and so did I. I'd do it again.
Of course, they invited you to the White House, I think, knowing that you were a skateboarder. So
yeah, I mean that was the basis of it. I don't know if they expected me to actually skate down the hall, but
well, it led to one of, I think, the all-time coolest.
I did get invited back though, so it all was not lost.
There's an incredible picture where you're like skating in front of the West Wing, like with kind of pants sagging and a suit jacket and just going like this, and it looks like just kind of pure joy out in front of
It was.
And so you dropped in a skate park yesterday. I think skate parks have been important to you in a number of ways. I want to read a letter that you printed in one of your books from a fan. Dear Mr. Hawk, my friends and I are trying to open a skate park. It's very sad to see that skaters here do not have a place to skate. Would you sponsor us? We will discuss money matters later. And then you later write about skate parks. You had an experience where you went to the opening of a skate park and found it to be very subpar in terms of the flow of the elements in the park. And you said, I was in a position to help stop such foolishness from recurring, to fix the ongoing disconnect between the people in positions to build public skate parks and the kids who ride them. And I think that led to some of what you do with the Tony Hawk Foundation, and not only to having the foundation, but the way that you sort of included kids and community in creating skate parks. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about
well, that was the inspiration to start a foundation. When I went to a park opening in an affluent area in Chicago, and it was the design was bad. The politicians were all congratulating themselves, on this job well done, and I came in and I got a sneak preview of the park the night before, and they were all asking me, "What's it like? What's it like?" And I said, "Honestly, it's pretty terrible. It's probably no better than the shopping mall down the street. This is not a well-designed park." And they said, "Oh, well, that's what all the kids said." But then we said, "Wait till Tony Hawk gets here and he shows you how to ride it." And I realized then that they weren't providing for, they weren't actually listening to the kids they're providing for. And maybe I could bridge that gap, but more importantly, I could direct those funds to more needy areas, more at-risk youth and low-income areas. And so what we do is we try to support communities that have already tried to get a park going, where that means petitioning the city, going to city council meetings, something that they're trying to change, but are being proactive about it. And we want to empower them by giving them funding, by giving them resources. And that way they feel like a sense of ownership of the place and more validation of their work, because otherwise it's just us coming in and sprinkling magic dust saying you need a park here, you need a park there, and they don't have a sense of pride in it, and maybe they are not going to take care of it.
And so it's really community development grants, I would say.
Community
as much
development,
as anything.
yes.
And I think I read that you said you had a park, you'd done a grant in every state except Connecticut at the time?
We're in every state now.
So
Connecticut, it's hard to find a low-income area in Connecticut, but
Fair
we
enough.
figured it out.
I actually have kind of a personal question. So you've done so many different things, video games, obviously, live events, foundation. And you wrote once that before your first video game was coming out, I was confident it would be well received because I'd played it so much and had shown it to friends whose opinions I trusted, people who'd tell me the truth if they thought it sucked. And I'm curious, with your success now, if it's harder to find people who will tell you if something sucks.
No, I have social media for that.
Okay, so...
God, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, they'll tell you when things suck. Even if it doesn't suck, they'll tell you it sucks. But I like it. I like the immediate feedback. It's like I have this, this multi-million person focus group at my disposal there.
I think you've called it free market research before. You said you'd be kind of an idiot to ignore it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and it's a challenge to filter out the noise and the trolls and things like that. But you can manage, and people who have valuable opinions, they shine through, and so I take it to heart.
And you, always have been with social media or tech in general, and basically an early adopter. You wrote of yourself when you were younger, the local Sharper image salesman got hard-ons when I strolled into the store.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So you've always been into tech. I think you had an online journal starting 1998.
Yeah.
Clips from your cell phones you're loading in 2001. By 2009, you're using Twitter directly, YouTube channels. How has it changed the experience, sort of from your end, with fans being able to access you in all these different avenues and directly?
It's incredible. Just the idea that you have that instant connection. And it's very two-way as well. I guess my best example of that is the night before I left for here. I was trying to figure out a good day to go to the skate park here. The weather is challenging to figure out, and I have a friend here, and he said, the only times you have available, it's supposed to rain the whole time. And I said, well, let's just do it Monday when I arrive. And so I sent a tweet and a Facebook posting on Sunday night. Basically, I will be at the skate park tomorrow at 3:30, and yesterday I would say there's about 1,000 people there. That was kind of a renegade demo, but that's all thanks to social media. So that's the kind of, and not that benefits me financially or anything, but I just think it's fun, and I think that's the idea and that's why maybe I've been successful at it, is because people see that I'm just doing it for fun. It's not like I'm trying to gain something. It's not like it's all about advertising and stuff. Definitely that stuff gets thrown in there, but for the most part, it's just about connecting and sharing these ridiculous scenarios that I find myself in.
I think sometimes you'll stash a skateboard somewhere and then tweet it's there, and there's like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, I started doing that on Twitter right when I got on there, because I saw how fast the information travels and how prolific it was. So that's where I started that. I started on Instagram. Instagram's harder to track the stuff if it's been found, so I tread lightly there, because I've had a lot of people angry, like, I've been looking for 3 hours, it's not here anymore. I'm like, well, I couldn't see who found it because I can't really figure out how to navigate that. But I've learned a better technique. And that's fun too. That's like, that gains a lot of interest, and people are very engaged in it.
And you mentioned sort of, not kind of abusing Twitter, using it for ads. Sort of maintaining authenticity while doing commercial things has been a theme that I think has sort of run out throughout your career. And you talk about using your several million Twitter followers responsibly. Can you talk about what you think that means?
Yeah, well, I just try to make it fun. Even if it's some sort of endorsement of a product, I still want to make it in my voice. Mm-hmm. And so I had to fight for that, though. I had to fight for that level of approval and that level of authenticity, because a lot of companies are like, this is our message. This is what you have to put. That sounds like a bad marketing ploy. Like that is not how I would say things, and that immediately is marked as an advertisement. If that's what you want, then so be it. But I think that if you allow me or our kind to integrate what we're doing in a more natural way, more, I hate when people say organic, but in a more organic way. Think outside the box, all that stuff. If they allow to just utilize this stuff more in your everyday life, it comes off much better, and it's genuine. Like I have this Sony camera, it's Action Cam. It's basically like their version of GoPro, and I've been using it a lot, and it totally works in my world. But I can't just be out there doing the action cam slogans. You know what I mean? It's got to be the way that I use it.
And I think you've had you kind of learned from some poor experiences in that regard. One that I think you've singled out before, an event for Fruit Loops, that sort of taught you an important lesson about image. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that was probably the tipping point for me in terms of gaining control over what I do endorsement-wise. And I was asked to do a promotion for Fruit Loops and talk about Toucan Sam as if he was an actual living, breathing, what is he, a parrot?
I think he's a toucan.
A toucan. Oh, yeah. Are toucans parrots? I just want to insult him, that's why. No, but that's if he's like a breathing character, and then he's extreme, and he likes to, he enjoys our kinds of sports and things, and it's like, and this PR woman just asked me to do this on camera, and it was like, this is where I sold out, right here. Like, this is the moment, and this is where I want to change how I do things. So.
And that included, I think, hiring designers that would then be sort of a design liaison between you and other businesses, right? To kind of keep graphics that felt authentic
and
to
try to have some more aesthetics that are matching, more continuity in what you're doing, And I had to, but like I said, I had to fight for it. I had to fight for it with my video game. I did a promotion with Doritos a while back and fought for how they use my image and how they use graphics and things and marketing agencies do not like to be told no. At all.
That you mentioned the idea that you felt like you were selling out. One of the things I loved about reading your Unlikely CEO book was that you print some of this direct fan feedback, some of which is unflattering and some of which is very flattering, right? And there's the mother who's thanking you for having reasonably priced boards, and then there are things like this one. Dear Tony Hawk, if I offered you $1 million, would you endorse my new dildo? I bet you would. And you printed this in your book, and there'll be.
It really depends on the quality of the construction of it.
The authenticity, and then there are others that are like, my brother has all 17 of your video games and 5 of your shirts. He thinks you're awesome. I think he's an idiot and stuff like that. You get these.
Well, I've learned through these great success, especially with video games, is that, it sounds like a rehearsed line, and it is kind of, but basically, people call you a sellout when your stuff finally sells. That's it. Because I've had signature products with my name on it since I was 14 years old. Nobody was buying them then.
Right.
Skating was the lamest thing you could do. And had McDonald's offered me a sponsorship when I was 14, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. So it's not like I ever coveted my skate career like that. It's more like I want to use, say, McDonald's marketing dollars to help promote skating in general. I made demands that all my sponsors donate to my foundation to build public skate parks. So I'm using their marketing money to actually grow skateboarding. But there's always going to be someone that's just like, you sold out. This is bullshit. This is not what skateboarding is all about. And it's like, it's a whole different. It's a whole different generation now, though, and it's much more inclusive of the bigger companies now. Red Bull, GoPro, they're all sponsoring the biggest events.
And like you said, you were never being duplicitous, right? Like McDonald's was a company that you used and that your kids
enjoyed.
I still
eat at McDonald's. I'm not even sponsored by them.
So here's one. I would encourage people to read your Unlikely CEO book because I think it's kind of an unvarnished look at some of this fan feedback in a way that's kind of rare. And from the good, the bad, and the bizarre, one of my favorite letters you printed was, Dear Tony, I have a lot of your games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, Tony Hawk's Underground, and Tony Hawk's Underground 2. But my older brother's the real Tony Hawk fan. I'm more interested in insects. And there's a point in the book where I think your sister mentions that you actually, at some point, would respond to basically every direct communication. I'm wondering if you respond to things like that or how you do. You obviously, it came onto your radar far enough that it ended up in your book.
Yeah, I do. If something strikes me as funny like that, or if I feel very passionately about it, but it is hard because obviously, especially on social media, people are just constantly asking questions, and so that is a bit hard to navigate. And I found myself at first, I found myself being very reactive to the trolls or to the bad comments, and people are like, "How come you respond to that?" And we're asking you genuine questions that are of good nature, and you won't respond to us. And I thought, yeah, you're right. It's because you get that, it's like the heckler. It's like, oh, that guy. but everyone else is laughing. So like I said, I just choose more stuff that I feel like has more resonance, and that is more interesting.
But it gets to the part that amazed me was that even got to your radar, the insects email. That somehow that got to your eyes. Said,
that probably, to be honest, my sister probably found them.
Fair enough.
And that rose to the top.
Fair enough. So while we're talking about kind of social media, I was wondering if we could talk about the Ride channel, sort of something new. Your website, I just watched one of the clips that's uploaded. It's sort of literally skaters telling bar stories, sitting at a bar and kind of telling stories.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk about why now and what you envision for it.
Well, we have been doing a channel on YouTube, the Ride channel, which is skate content, skate-centric. And we were funded by Google when they were doing all the different channel funding. We made the cut to the second year, which was exciting for us. Our subscriber base was growing. And then we partnered with Complex Media so that we have more of a magazine format on their site that does have our YouTube videos, but also curates other content, a lot of editorial, really in-depth stories. And it's not just for pure skaters. Like, there's some really interesting history. There's a lot of music and art associated with our culture. So, there's a broader audience for us, but also because we bring in the Complex readers, they're right in line with what with the people we're trying to target. So that's a big step for us. I mean, it's really like a hub for that sort of thing now.
Yeah, I was wondering where you see kind of the growth market in skating. I mean, one thing that occurred to me was, like in many sports, in participation and in spectating, is girls and young women are a growth market.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how if the Ride channel will plan kind of anything specific to reach out to them, or sort of let it grow, organically.
Yeah, well, we're definitely trying to support more and cover more of the women's skating. But to be honest, there's a really exciting project. I don't know if anyone's heard of Skateistan here, but there's a skate project in Afghanistan, in Kabul. And the Skateistan project itself has been going a few years and is really, there's a whole educational element. And they have all these kids in Afghanistan skating. I mean, it's amazing if you look it up. But the coolest thing about that is that there was no preconceived notion about who skated, if it was male dominated or not. So they have equal ratio of boys to girls skating in Afghanistan, and it's the only, from what I understand, the only co-ed sport there is there, because it's just brand new to them. So they kind of created it on their own of who should be doing it or who can do it. And I think that's more progressive than the U.S. in terms of ratios. So I love that fact, and they also, my foundation is now promoting or supporting Skateistan projects in other countries. So they now have a Skateistan in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. I went last year. It was a blast. They have a whole female group that comes in twice a week. We just funded their next project in South Africa. And I think that's the future. I mean, it kind of have to be on the outside looking in, because once you're looking at it from that perspective, we should be taking inspiration in other countries for the fact that they have so much support for the female skaters.
It seems like throughout your career, you've actually, from time to time, drawn inspiration from developing countries, where you'll in your writing, you'll say, well, some amazing thing is happening. You're flying on a private jet with celebrities, and then you're in a country in Africa where you're seeing 4-year-olds taking care of 2-year-olds. And this interesting sort of whipsawing in where you're drawing your inspiration from, but it seems like developing countries is something you've returned to for perspective regularly.
Well, no, I don't just go there. Like, it's not like I'm going to sabbatical. I really go, like, I went to Ethiopia last year on behalf of Charity Water because I really wanted to see the work they do, and I feel like they're a huge inspiration for me in terms of raising awareness for philanthropy and how to raise funding and how to be effective and fun, in terms of being a charity. And so I went there to see their work. I support them quite a bit, and it's incredible to me. But to be living in that paradox too is strange. But it gives you such a better perspective on things and a better appreciation for what you have and where you are. Like I never dreamed that I'd be able to make a living skating. To be honest, when I was young, to aspire to be the best skater, you either got free gear or you got your picture in the magazine. That's it. And once you're 18, you got to find a job. And as skating started to grow, and as I started to sort of it wasn't like I was living this dream. It was more like I was creating this dream, because no one really had that dream before. So and to this day, I mean, the fact that I get to come to a place like this in Dublin and people want to hear me talk is crazy to me. I rode a skateboard. Like, I was made fun of all through high school for riding a skateboard.
So it seems like that your approach to skating in some ways was like long-term investment strategy, right? Like, you were doing something that you liked and you felt like was worthwhile. And when you started, it was really at a low point for skating, when it wasn't that popular. And then you stayed with it, and skating changed kind of beneath you while you were doing it, up to the point where I think your 1999 was like kind of the sports equivalent of like Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, his year of miracles, where all these things kind of coincided to change what he did. So you had that year where...
I've never had a comparison to Einstein, but thank you for that.
He was a science writer for you. But in that year, so you had been doing vert, you had continued practicing vert skating, even while it was unpopular, and then suddenly the X Games start bringing it back, so you're in practice when a lot of other skaters aren't. And of course, your first video game is coming out in 1999, which becomes a huge franchise. And of course, you pull the 900, the full 2.5 rotations at the X Games, and immediately overnight become the face of skating. And the full YouTube clip showing you missing and missing and missing and going again is just an incredible piece of sports footage. And I was wondering if you can just describe that and talk about why you officially should not have been the winner of that competition.
Well, the 900 was something that I had been chasing for a long time. It was sort of the next step, that next evolution in spinning moves. I had created the 720 that was like 1985. I got to skate this bigger ramp than usual and found that more airtime allows you more spin, and so I learned how to do 720s, and then the next step obviously was 900. I didn't really get the nerve to try it until about 10 years later. So from the years of 95 to 99, I was trying it off and on, and never had I pursued a trick for so long. And so at the point of 1999, when the X Games came, I'd basically given up on it because I had broken my rib trying it. I had thought that I'd done the best technique possible and still couldn't come through. So it was just like, I don't know, I'm not going to make this trick. But in 99, they had the first best trick event of X Games. And so my best trick at the time was a varial 720, which is basically a 720 spin while spinning your board an extra rotation, meaning your board does a 900, your body does a 720. It was my best trick at the time. I'd only made it once before. And so I made that trick. The whole event was supposed to take place in 20 minutes. I made that trick about 10 minutes into the event. That was it. That's all I had planned. So I had 10 minutes to just kind of mess around. And so I thought, okay, I'll spin 900 for the crowd because they know that I've been trying. Well, I'm not assuming much, but I know that a few of them know that I've been trying this, that I've been chasing it, and here's how it looks. Here's how I look flailing on this trick. And after about 4 or 5 tries, my spin was consistent, and I started to be able to feel where I was in terms of the very last rotation. And usually that only came once every few tries for me. It wasn't consistent like that. So after about the 5th try, I thought, wow, I could actually maybe try to land again, And at that point, I didn't really care if I was going to break my rib. That'd be awesome to, be carried on a stretcher, X Games best trick. Like,
sounds awesome.
So at that point, I was getting so close. That's what was going to happen. I mean, it was either I was going to end up in the hospital, or I was going to make the trick. And the reason that I shouldn't have won the event is because I ended up making it after the time had expired, which I didn't care if they counted it. I was just like, I was possessed. I was going to make this trick no matter what, even if the whole, it was like going the distance. Like, even if the crowd had gone home, I would just be on that ramp trying it over and over. But it finally worked, and I figured out a very crucial technique that night. That was to shift my weight a little bit back as I was spinning, and figured it out.
I mean, there was some kind of, I think, magic in that air. Nobody talked about the time. Like, the other skaters, it looked like no one had a moment's hesitation that you would just keep going until you got it.
Yeah, but also they come from the same mindset,
right,
where we get like you saw in that video. That was it. That video is actually my newest skate video. We just released it last week. I just finished it, but that part in the middle is showing, the progression of trying one trick over and over and over. And it's not like that was the most dangerous and the most groundbreaking trick, but it's really hard. And I wanted to show that reality of what we go through. I mean, that's basically me trying that trick for like 2 hours alone in my warehouse until I get it. And to be honest, that's what it takes to make it in skateboarding.
Everybody should watch that.
But that's what it takes to make it in anything. That you're willing to try and fail and learn from your mistakes. I mean, that if I ever had some message that could resonate to a crowd like this, that would be it. It's like, you got to keep getting back and trying it, because eventually you're going to figure it out.
Yeah, so I think your approach to it is actually something I've written a lot about in sports science called self-regulatory behavior. That's this alternation of focus and reflection and experimentation. And you had a line that you wrote, or 2 lines that I think summed it up beautifully. I'd practice a single trick for hours straight. I'd fall, analyze what I did wrong, and then try it again. I did this like a broken record until I landed a trick. If I messed up, I'd solve the problem by watching other skaters or concentrating harder on the trick. It's kind of the magic sauce, it seems like. Right
yeah.
There.
Well, the beauty now is that you can watch yourself on video and figure out your mistakes too. That way you can keep your new trick a secret.
Oh, great. I actually saw, it really reminded me once at the U.S. Open, I saw on a practice court Roger Federer tell a ball boy to hold his hand like this, and he tried to serve the ball right into his hand without him moving it.
Oh.
And he'd go here and there, and he spent 30 minutes doing nothing but that until he finally
Wow.
put one in the guy's hand. I think it's kind of analogous to what you do with the skate tricks. And I'm curious if you still, you could say there's nothing really left for you to accomplish in skating in a way, but I wonder if you still feel that motivation if there's a trick that you're not getting right, and you still feel that almost kind of manic drive to
yeah, well, that video is a perfect example. The video is called Perched, if anyone wants to see it. It's on YouTube too, but the very last trick in that video is something that I was working on for the last year, and I would go and test it, and then finally I said, okay, we're nearing the end of production of this video. Today's the day. This is the day I'm going to make it, and I just tried the trick for like 2.5, 3 hours, over and over and over, and kept, and little by little was just chipping away at all the pieces of it and figuring it out, and finally I got it. And I probably will be the only one I ever do, because it's going to take me it's going to take me so many more tries to make it again, even though I know the technique, I know what I have to do. Everything has to come together, the planets have to align. Yeah. And I'm just too old and tired to go through that again.
There's video of you online flipping off your skateboard yesterday in Dublin onto the
That's my secret. That's my secret exit to my exhibitions.
Flipping off the board.
That's my good out.
So I wonder if you were doing what you love. You said you never expected to make money on it. It seems to me that you might have been doing this even if you would have been a pauper in doing this. I mean, maybe you would have needed another job.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I say that all the time. We get paid ridiculous amounts of money to do something that we would absolutely do for free. So that's living the dream to me. I mean, just getting to do what you love for a living, that's the dream.
You've described once an assignment where I think your son was in class and kids were asked to describe what their father does, and one kid says, "My dad sells money." Another said, "My dad figures stuff out," and yours said, "I've never seen my dad do work."
Yes, that is true.
Seems kind of like the trick, but it seems like you feel the same way. I know when you were younger, you had you had the chance to create your own gym class if you could get someone to sign off on it. So you created skater training, and what you described doing is like elite sports training, but you laugh at it. You're like, we got passed off trying skate tricks as training.
I just had to have the skate park manager say I was there for like 1 hour a day. He was happy to do that.
But it was funny that you lampooned it, whereas when I read the description of it, I'm like, this is exactly the ideal of like high sports performance training.
Well,
you're like,
that
he thought it
school
was...
now in San Diego, that school now has a skate PE program where they all get in a bus in the morning and they go to the local skate park. And I mean, that would be just absurd in my day, that like we had to totally force our curriculum. But they allowed me to do it, so I can't complain.
And you mentioned kind of learning from your failures. You've had... it seems like you have a little bit of you're not really risk averse. When you were starting Birdhouse and other companies, you'd put a lot of your own money into it and say, well, if this doesn't work out, at least I can still skate, but it might not be good financially. You've had things like pink canvas backpacks that maybe you wouldn't have partnered with before. What do you kind of consider your biggest failure among your many successes?
Well, through my company Birdhouse and our distribution, about 10 years ago, we invested in a high-end denim line, right just before the really expensive dyes and washes and everything was. Let's just say it was before Ed Hardy. Okay, it was like cool Ed Hardy before Ed Hardy, and it was so expensive, and it was such a boutique line, and it just drained all of the income we had from the whole building. And I didn't realize how much it cost to, cut and sew and produce stuff like that. And we basically sold it off for what we had our debt. And that was, it was a learning experience. I don't like to say big mistake, because it's like I learned so much from that, and I learned how much money you can lose. But also, I just how to do it better next time, and that's the same with skating.
And I think in your own words about that denim experience, you got to wear a lot of cool shit in the meantime, so it wasn't.
I did. I had a free wardrobe. Well, free. How could I call it free? I had this cool wardrobe. It cost me millions of dollars in debt.
Yeah, you got to wear free stuff as long as you paid more than anybody else for it.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to ask you about in the media, obviously, video has been a huge part of your career. You've made videos. You've helped others make videos, and you sort of joke about how sometimes the industry was almost predicated on small acts of piracy. You even describe a time when you basically bought some Quicksilver shirts, covered up their brand with yours for a trade show, or would incubate sort of video makers who would pirate music but make sure they got some distribution by the time they got the cease and desist letter. And it was this interesting sort of recurrent low-grade piracy. And I'm curious if you kind of endorsed that, or once you became more established, you would go after other people for that, or it's just interesting.
Well, it was at a time when everything has changed. Obviously, the landscape of how you get rights and what is approved and how it's used is totally different now. But it was more just based on necessity, because we just didn't have any money to get music. So like the first video I did for my company, Birdhouse, first skate video, and we used like the Beatles in one section. There's no way we're trying to get the rights to that. And so somehow my rationale was, well, we are only selling the video for the cost of production. We sold the videotapes for $5. I was like, so we're giving it away, so it's okay. We're not making any money off of it. I was naive anyway, but that has been the MO for skate culture, is more do it yourself and more renegade, and kind of on the edge of what's legal for sure. If you look at the company World Industries, all their graphics in the early days were just ripped off from big cartoons. It was like Mickey Mouse, and it was Hello Kitty, and just all these different. It's just ridiculous what they got away with, because we were so under the radar.
So I think we're technically out of time, but I want to ask you one other question. So whenever someone does something that they love and it becomes lucrative, a lot of people see that and pursue it because it's lucrative, and oftentimes that turns into parents pushing kids to do something that's lucrative. Your father became incredibly influential in skating, started a skate association, but seemed to avoid some of the pitfalls of becoming like the dreaded kind of football dad. You said of him, if there's one thing my parents are masters at, it's encouraging their kids to follow their dreams.
Yeah.
And
well, it was more because I found skateboarding, and then I really fell in love with it, and I was spending more time doing it, and then my dad was supportive of it. It was more like he wasn't pushing me to do something first. It was more like he was following my lead, and as a parent myself now, that's the best I can do, is to encourage, when my kids find a passion, is to encourage them in it, and not go, wait a second, you got to ride a skateboard. That's what you need to do. Even though I say that, my oldest son is a pro skater. But my other kids, they're not as serious about it. They like it, but one's way more into music. One is more into Minecraft, pretty much only Minecraft. But he is, like, I watch him. He's a wizard at it. He creates his own servers, and he's like, wow, I want to encourage him to do creative things like that.
So quick last question. Having accomplished what you've accomplished, what keeps you driven? What keeps you going?
To be honest, everything nowadays is sort of, it's like everything is, I don't want to say gravy, but it's just a nice challenge. I like new challenges. I like to be surprised. I mean, even to come to places in conferences and do speeches, like, that's a challenge to me, because that's not something I ever trained for. But it's fun, and it's fun to give my perspective on these types of things, and I'm just enjoying the ride nowadays. It's not like I'm fighting to make it. I mean, in terms of, like, skateboarding is here. It permeates pop culture now, and so it's not like we're trying to gain acceptance anymore. You know, it's just more fun.
I think, as you've said, in the United States, it's more popular than Little League now, and obviously in no small part due to the things you've done on and off the ramp. I just want to thank you very much for being here and talking to me.
Thank you.